For decades, you were taught that the first humans reached the Americas by walking through a gap in the ice. One route, one story. Everyone believed it. But right now, buried under freezing water off the coast of Vancouver, sits proof that story was never the full picture. This is the coastal migration theory. And it changes everything we thought we knew about how humans reached two entire continents. Here's the story we were told first. As the last ice age ended, a corridor opened up through the middle of North America, a narrow gap between two massive ice sheets that had covered the continent for thousands of years. Small groups of hunters walked south through that corridor, following herds of mammoth and bison. They left behind a very specific kind of stone tool, sharp, fluted, unmistakable. Archaeologists called it Clovis, after the town in New Mexico where it was first identified. For decades, this wasn't treated as a theory, it was treated as fact. Clovis first. The first Americans, walking through ice, 12,000 years ago, full stop. Then something didn't add up. Thousands of kilometers south, in Monteverde, Chile, archaeologists found human tools, hearths, even preserved plant remains, dated far older than they should have been. Older than the ice-free corridor even existed. If people were already at the southern tip of two continents before the walking route opened up, how did they get there? Genetics gave us part of the answer. Mitochondrial DNA studies show that nearly all indigenous peoples across the Americas trace back to a single founding population, one that split off from ancestors in Siberia more than 20,000 years ago. Not several waves of migration. One population, one journey. But that same genetic evidence revealed something stranger. It looked like this population didn't move straight through. They appear to have stalled for thousands of years, isolated somewhere in Beringia, the land bridge itself, before finally continuing south. Scientists call it the Beringian standstill. An entire population waiting, generation after generation, on a strip of land that doesn't even exist anymore. When they finally moved again, they didn't walk through ice. The answer was hiding along the coast the whole time. Archaeologists call it the Kelp Highway. Instead of walking through ice, the first Americans moved along the Pacific shoreline, by foot and by boat. And boats weren't a stretch for people this early. Humans had already reached Australia by open water boat roughly 65,000 years earlier. Crossing along a coastline, hugging the shore the entire way, was well within reach. This was a coastline rich with fish, seals, shellfish, and dense kelp forests, food enough to sustain them the entire way down, generation after generation, without ever needing to cross the frozen interior at all. Picture what that actually meant day to day. No trekking through waist-deep snow. No hunting parties gambling on whether a mammoth herd would show up before the food ran out. Just a coastline that resupplied itself every single day. Low tide alone could feed a family, shellfish sitting right there in the rocks, no weapons required. This wasn't a desperate migration. It was closer to a slow, well-fed drift southward, one bay at a time, over dozens of generations. And this route runs directly past what is now Vancouver, British Columbia. Except the coastline these people lived on isn't where Vancouver's coastline is today. During the Ice Age, sea levels were up to 150 meters lower than they are right now. The actual shoreline these people walked, hunted, and built their lives on is now underwater, out past the modern coast, swallowed by the rising Pacific thousands of years ago, which means an entire chapter of human history is sitting on the ocean floor. This is why archaeologists started diving instead of digging. Off the coast of Haida Gwaii, researchers located ancient landscapes and stone tools sitting on what used to be dry land, now buried under the Pacific Ocean. It's one of the only places on Earth where you can find genuine Ice Age campsites at scuba depth, untouched for over 10,000 years. Divers have mapped old riverbeds down there, drowned forests, even the shape of ancient valleys. A whole landscape frozen in time, just filled with salt water instead of air. Further north, in Alaska, the coastal trail leaves something even more direct. At a site called On Your Knees Cave, archaeologists uncovered human remains dating back roughly 10,300 years. Scientists extracted DNA from those remains and matched it to living members of the Tlingit Nation today. This isn't a distant, disconnected population. It's a direct, traceable line from an Ice Age traveler to a living indigenous community. Somewhere in Alaska right now, there are people whose ancestors walked this exact coastline while glaciers were still carving out the landscape around them. But the strongest proof yet wasn't found underwater or in a cave. It was found on a small island most people have never heard of. In 2016, researchers with the Hawkeye Institute were excavating on Triquet Island, off the central coast of British Columbia, when they uncovered a hearth, a fire pit, charcoal, burnt fish bones, and tools, dated to nearly 14,000 years old. That makes it one of the oldest confirmed human settlements in North America, sitting almost exactly on the coastal route the Kelp Highway theory predicted. Heiltsuk oral history had spoken for generations of an island that never froze during the Ice Age, a place their ancestors could always return to. When archaeologists finally dug there, the science lined up with the story exactly. Not a legend, a memory. Think about what that means. A story passed down by word of mouth for roughly 14,000 years turned out to be geographically accurate down to the island. No written records, no maps. Just generations of people telling their children exactly where their ancestors came from and being right the entire time. Further inland in British Columbia sits Charlie Lake Cave. Human tools here date back roughly 10,500 years. But the tools aren't the strangest part. Inside the cave, archaeologists found something deliberately buried. Not a person. 2 ravens placed there on purpose, arranged with what looks like intention. This wasn't survival. This was belief. A ritual, thousands of years before writing existed anywhere on Earth. Whatever those ravens meant to the people who buried them, it mattered enough to stop, dig, and do it properly. That's not the behavior of people just trying to stay alive. That's the behavior of people with a worldview. The coastal route keeps going south too, past the modern border, into what's now Oregon. At the Paisley Caves, archaeologists made an unusual discovery: fossilized human waste, called coprolites, containing preserved human DNA, dated to over 14,000 years old. Rare, direct genetic proof of exactly who was living there, not just what they left behind. It's not glamorous, but it might be some of the most honest evidence archaeology has. No tool was staged, no fire pit was arranged for show. Just people, living their lives, leaving something behind without ever knowing it would outlast them by 14,000 years. Keep following the coast, and you reach California. On the Channel Islands, the remains of a man now called Arlington Springs Man were uncovered, dated to roughly 13,000 years old, among the oldest human remains ever found in North America. Alongside him, researchers found a maritime toolkit built for hunting seabirds and shellfish. Further proof this was a population built around the ocean, not away from it. To even reach those islands, his people needed boats capable of open water crossings. Further proof this wasn't a population stumbling along the coast by accident. They were mariners. Cross into Mexico, and the trail continues to Cedros Island, off Baja California, where archaeologists have recovered stone tools linked to the same migration window. This population didn't stop at any modern border, because borders didn't exist yet. To them, this was just the next bay, the next island, the next stretch of kelp forest. Back to where we started. Monteverde, Chile, the site that broke Clovis first in the first place. If people were this far south this early, walking through a corridor that didn't exist yet was never the answer. The coast was. Monteverde sits inland from the current coastline today, but at the time, the ocean would have been much closer. Close enough that the people living there were still eating seaweed, a species that only grows on the coast, found preserved in the site itself. And the trail doesn't even stop there. In northern Peru, at a site called Huaca Prieta, archaeologists found evidence of coastal communities fishing and building complex societies thousands of years later, descendants, in a sense, of the very first groups who made this same journey down the Pacific coastline millennia earlier. By the time Huaca Prieta was thriving, the original journey down the coast was already ancient history to the people living there, the way the Roman Empire feels ancient to us now. Put it together, and the modern map isn't just cities and coastlines. Vancouver, Haida Gwaii, On Your Knees Cave, Trique Island, Charlie Lake, the Paisley Caves, the Channel Islands, Cedros Island, Monteverde, Huaca Prieta. It's a fossilized migration route, one that rewrote when and how humans reached two entire continents. A 15,000-mile journey made without maps, without metal tools, without anything we'd recognize as technology, just people, boats, and a coastline that never stopped feeding them. So, next time you're looking at a map of the Pacific coast, you're not just looking at cities. You're looking at the oldest road in the Americas, one that's mostly underwater now, waiting to be found.